Hey everyone, and okay, I'm just gonna say straight up, as a manga reader, coming out of this episode really hit different. Like, knowing what I know, it definitely hits a different tone for sure. But, okay. So, right out of the gate, my prayers from last week's review were answered as we got a new opening, and woo doggy! Much like the first Season 2 opening, this one is just as much of a spoiler palooza as the last one, if not more so, to the point of not only showing spoilers of stuff we may potentially cover in this second half, but also showing stuff that isn't supposed to be adapted until Season 3. So, right out of the gate, this opening does make me wonder if we're going to still have this opening a little longer going into the next season, or if it's going to be a different opening for going into Season 3. I don't know, but yeah, like, the whole, there were so many fucking spoilers in this goddamn opening, like, even more so than Season 2 in the first one, honestly. Also, if the opening is giving us spoilers for the next arc after this one, it does make me think we will be covering at least a sizable chunk of Foresta. Maybe not all of it, but definitely the introductory segments, I think. Now, I'm just going to get this out of the way, because it's the biggest problem I have with the episode. The recap was unnecessarily lengthy. Made especially apparent by the fact that we essentially got two recaps within the episode itself. One being your typical recap bumper showing events from the previous episode, and then Zhao Mei's recap. And yeah, it's one of those things that does make it feel like this episode got a little bit of that One Piece anime treatment with these two things colliding. That they really could have cut the former recap in my opinion, but I get why they did it. With that said, however, the episode itself gets into the meat of the Red Cave arc and does still cover a significant portion of the arc's story, so I imagine within next episode we'll more or less be finished with this arc. And honestly, I don't want to go full-on conspiracy theorist about it, but at the end of the episode we get introduced to a robotic woman known as Nadia, and this same character has more or less recently made her comeback in the manga, so this just leads me to wonder how much of this episode was planned and how much of it is just pure coincidence. Because the timing of this episode and Nadia getting her reintroduction in the manga, both happening within the same week, like, the stars have aligned a little too perfectly for this one to be more than mere coincidence in my book. Like, again, full-on conspiracy theorist, but I think Masha might have talked with the studio to kind of plan this out a bit. And honestly, from an adaptation standpoint and just the atmosphere and the colors of everything, this episode was really beautiful. If there was ever an episode that in my opinion brought the feelings and the atmosphere and the tone of the manga to life, this is that episode. Like, as weird as it is to say, Red Cave just brought back those very same visual awe that I had felt like reading this in the manga, honestly. Maybe might have oversaturated things a little bit in certain places, but overall, just the way they adapted Red Cave in this episode, it was just really beautiful. Also, I gotta say this before I forget, but looking back on Red Cave as a manga reader is interesting, because as a whole, I imagine it'll come off as a bit of canon filler to a lot of people. Like, it's gonna set things up, but as a whole, it's not really gonna leave a whole lot of impact on the story, at least to some people. And Lord knows, I thought the same thing for the longest time. But revisiting it now and where the series goes beyond this point makes me realize just how much of a calm before the storm that this arc really is. Like, I guess kind of pseudo spoilers for the manga, but Red Cave in a lot of ways is like the final arc where we really get a chance to breathe in between the more insane stuff. Like, after this point, it just goes full throttle into insanity. Like, seeing the crew all happy and content and just living their lives freely and happy, it just enjoy their time on Red Cave. Like, I say this seriously and true. Soak this moment in, rewatch this episode as many times as you can. Enjoy it while you can, guys, because it'll be the last time you see a moment like that, or at least for a long while. So just, again, try and soak this moment in as long as you can, everyone, because after this, like, it's just full on there's no, Mashima does not hold back on the insanity of everything else. And honestly, as far as beach episodes go, I honestly think this is one of the more clever uses of the episode for that reason, and just especially considering what happens in the aftermath of the next big story saga. Again, this one definitely has got much more somber tone to it this time around, but okay. We do got to talk about the major reveals in this episode, which is our heroes discover a crashed vessel with the body of a dead astronaut, along with a sunken temple that has iconography in the image of Mother. And I'll be honest, just from a pacing standpoint, I do find a lot of these moments do play out a little bit better in the anime. Like, I think for me, it was a problem where this arc did feel a little sluggish reading from week to week, but the way it plays out in the anime does feel more coherent, even if we lose a little bit of that slow build-up and the mystery of it all. And as far as the Mother reveal itself, this is kind of the more interesting part because, as I said, this is stuff that is set to be addressed currently in the manga, but anime onlys, I'm just going to say it right here now, you will be waiting quite a while. Like, the questions this episode poses about Mother are... This episode and this arc in general poses about Mother are going to be addressed a little in Season 3, but not fully addressed until Season 4 either. It's kind of one of those weird things. But beyond that, again, I like how this episode we see, like, similar in the image to Grand Bell with all the dead robots on the seafloor, showing there's something more going on with it. And, okay, but... Getting back to Nadia, though, getting back to Nadia herself, obviously with the introduction to Nadia, like, Rebecca immediately recalls, like, seeing the word Nadia inscripted on the dead passenger's cockpit, cockpit or whatever, and, yeah, it's kind of setting up, she's not going to be very happy when she finds out the supposed one she loves, kind of dead, so, yeah, that's gonna be kind of interesting to see. But of course, Nadia isn't the only introduction we get in this episode as well, as we get introduced to the other members of the Russian States Interstellar. Eraser, and unfortunately, the episode, like, Crunchyroll really needs to fix up the bumpers or the bumpers and the subtitles on this one, because we didn't get the names of all of these characters, but basically the names of all these characters are Eraser, Feather, Holy, Cure, and Jaguar. And honestly, not a whole lot to say about this other than, on top of really liking how their designs got translated from page to screen, looking back on two of these characters is interesting in terms of where Mashima takes them. One, I don't think I was going to be as invested in as I was, and the other, let's just say the execution could have been handled better, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Although, I will say, it's also interesting looking back on a lot of these scenes with Justice, because honestly, I remember this is around the point where I was getting so frustrated with the guy's obsession with Elsie, and I'm like, please, motherfucker, for the love of God, would you please actually pay attention to everything else going on around you? And honestly, even now, I still don't think that is necessarily going to go away. I think I'm still going to get a little bit frustrated with him, but I do understand, but again, knowledge from the manga, context is an interesting thing in it. I do understand a little bit more now about just why he's as angry at Elsie as he is, and I know there's a lot of people who definitely think of Erz and Jalal in terms of their relationship, but honestly, you'll find their story ends a little bit differently than it did for Erz and Jalal. Even the bits we get with Justice in this episode do give, like, greater context for what's to happen from here. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, Analyst Crunchyroll. Be sure to notification bell, hit the subscribe button, and just share the video around, guys. Dark Knight of the Night signing off. Later, everyone.